Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be doing our next lecture on Chapter 12.2, Fiscal Monetary Policy, the Federal Reserve. So this is lesson, let's see here, lesson 4 that you should be on right now. So hopefully you're on that. And yeah, so here I'll pull up the slides. I think I'm just going to do like this, so that way you can kind of see me too. I know you guys all miss me. All right, anyway, you should be taking these in your guided notes. Again, you had some workbook pages, chapter 26 and 27. There was exit tickets for that. So make sure you guys, do that in your workbook. All right, so going kind of highlighting, talking about some of those key concepts. Hopefully the workbook did a good job of, doing that. You also have an ed puzzle on the Federal Reserve as well. All right, so let's go to this. All right, so federal government and its domestic economy. So ultimately, in terms of the domestic federal government, their role in the economy is to make sure that there's fairness, there's competition. Without competition, prices go up. So think back to U.S. history when you have monopoly. When you have monopoly over something, prices go up. There's no competition. Companies can take advantage of workers as well as consumers. So ultimately, government has in place, their job is to make sure that they do embrace. It's kind of a fine line because you have to embrace capitalism and making money, but you also have to promote fairness as well. So that they kind of have to play that tightrope essentially, where they're promoting individuality and economic growth and making as much money as you can, the individual part of it, but you also need to make sure that you're doing what's best for the whole. And competition is what's best for consumers, keeps prices down. So they look out for consumers, look out for workers as well. And their policies they have in terms of the domestic economy, it is felt at all three levels. You have your national, you have your state, and you have your local levels. I mean, if you look at what's going on right now, in terms of the coronavirus, a lot of local and state policies are, trying to get federal funds. They just lowered the interest rates, the Fed. So you guys should have already read about that in your workbooks. The Federal Reserve have lowered interest rates to try and combat some of the economic effects, and that's affect banks all over the country, not just even private and local banks. That's felt everywhere, local, state, federal, in terms of their role. All right, let's see here. Going down. All right, so the Federal Reserve, or also known as the Fed, this was created in 1913. This is the central bank of the United States. There's a board of directors for this, chairperson. This is a part of the executive branch. So the president, they are in charge of placing those in charge of the Federal Reserve. These 12 members, the board of directors and the chairperson, who are in charge of these 12 regional banks. I'll show you a picture here in a minute of the regional banks, but it's all part of the executive branch, just to make sure that the executive branch they're overseeing, and they work hand in hand with Congress as well, with passing laws. The executive will enforce them, but making sure that the economy is running smoothly. So they use monetary policy to promote stability and full employment and economic growth. So that's ultimately their goal and what they do. So kind of going down to this. All right, so kind of just kind of using some kind of what they look at, what the federal government does. So when the economy is going into a recession, there's a downturn. They increase supply. So the Federal Reserve puts more money into circulation. They increase the money supply when there's a tough time. So that's when you'll start seeing the federal government putting more money, more investment into the economy. Start spending more. The Federal Reserve will lower interest rates. So what they're hoping is by lowering interest rates, you're hoping that consumers will borrow, will spend, they'll buy more cars, they'll buy more houses that will spark the economy. That's what they're hoping. So the federal government will spend, Federal Reserve will lower interest rates. hoping the consumers will entice them to buy the big ticket items. So right now, for instance, we're in, for the economy, the Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates big time. It's like at 3.2%. It's usually it's unheard of. It's usually around 4 or 5%, probably around 4. So right now it's at 3.2. So they're encouraged. So right now the housing market, people are buying and selling like crazy right now. Houses are flying off because people want to purchase new homes. So this is also meant to encourage more borrowing, to create more jobs, and have businesses start to expand if they're taking lower interest rates. And yeah, so we'll go on to the next one. So when times are good, when you have an upswing and the economy is going really well, the federal government will reduce the money supply. So they want to drive up inflation. So they will raise interest rates to slow down borrowing. So this is when the Federal Reserve will increase the interest rate to start slowing down spending a little bit, slow down borrowing, keep inflation low, kind of thing. So businesses typically borrow less money, so they won't really expand quite as much because interest rates are higher. Now, this is meant to bring prices back down to nationwide to correct the economy. So the Federal Reserve is constantly looking at this. They're lowering, they're increasing, they're looking at unemployment and inflation, and they're constantly adjusting interest rates and putting the money supply back up, and holding banks more accountable too. So you see raising reserve requirements for banks as well. So what banks have to have on hand. So here's a picture kind of showcasing the Federal Reserve System. There's 12 branches. So you see where the Federal Reserve at in each one. So anyway, you see that there. So we're in Region 4. And there actually is one in Cleveland. So a couple of things that they have, some executive branch topics that you see that you guys read about in your workbook too. The Securities and Exchange Commission was set up in the 1930s, again after stock market crash, Great Depression. This is the watchdog of the stock market and corporations. They look at insider trading. So we actually had a Browns player a couple years ago, a linebacker, I can't remember his name, but he was busted for insider trading. So basically what that means is that when you're getting tips, when people that are who do this for a living, who work in the stock market, are going, hey, you buy this. We have a little tip to get rich. So that is not allowed. Full disclosure for corporations and whatnot. So that's there. They overlook the stock market and make sure that people are following the rules. The Department of Labor. So again, going back to what I said before, in terms of overseeing the economy, part of the government is to oversee the workers, make sure that workers are being treated fairly. So the Department of Labor was set up. For Ohio, it's called OSHA, OSHA. This is Occupational Safety and Health, was set up in 1971, to make sure that corporations and businesses are treating workers fairly. And again, it's a state agency. Federal government's also a part of this. So the ESA, Employment Standards Administration, fairness of contracts, benefits, wages. Again, it's important to protect workers, but it can also be a burden to business owners. So they kind of have to have that balance. So that was that. Key goals of the economy. It's the economy stupid, very famous quote during the 1992 election with Bill Clinton against George Bush. George Bush was an incumbent president, meaning that he was already in power. But so he ended the Cold War, and he also fought the Persian Gulf War. The problem was the economy was in the tubes from all the wars and the Cold War and stuff that we fought. So Bill Clinton, made a point to really focus on the economy, because the economy was not doing very well in 1992. So that's during his campaign, during his debates, he really hammered home the economy, and he defeated George Bush to win the election, which is again, which was kind of a tough thing. It's not something that happens all the time. Usually incumbents typically tend to get a second term, but he didn't. So 3 goals to the economy. So what did the federal government do? What do they ensure? What does the Fed look at? They want full employment, at least as much as possible. They want to have enough jobs for those willing and able to work. 2, they want price stability. So they're constantly looking at inflation and deflation of the dollar. So that's why they keep on adjusting, the interest rates up and down to try and keep up with the ebbs and flows of the economy. And then the third thing is economic growth. They want the GDP, the gross domestic product, to constantly grow, looking at your imports versus exports. All right, so fiscal policy and the economy. So this all goes down to the government's power to tax, to raise money, to influence. So how do they put money into the economy? Well, they need to get money first through the taxing power. The president, aided by agencies such as the Council of Economic Advisors, often makes specific recommendations with regard to the economy. The legislative branch, this is kind of where the executive branch and the legislative branches, they work together to enforce the laws and to make laws towards fiscal policy, to what's best for the economy. So I already went over that. So John Maynard Keyes. So this is kind of where, going into two different economic theories. John Maynard Keyes, that are also known as the Keynesian economics. He believes that government must spend money to employ people, even if they have to borrow money to do so. This is demand side economics. So increase the government spending, more employment, higher taxes. So in this kind of theory, John, with the Keynesian economics, borrow. You get a higher taxes to pay for things. So you have a bigger government. Think of like FDR-ish kind of idea. You grow the government, you keep borrowing, you use deficit spending to borrow more money than what you take in. Then the 1980s, and you see this with Trump, he developed something called Reaganomics, where you lower taxes amongst the people. If you lower taxes, that means people have more money in their pockets. Now, your hoping is, by lower more money in their pockets, they're hoping that people will invest and will spend. It's the trickle-down effect. You lower the taxes, people have more money, people will go out and put more money back into the economy with jobs and spending. So here's some of the tools. You can kind of read through that. Fiscal policy, you can taxes, example of fiscal policy, increase, decrease taxes. You can increase, decrease spending. So again, that's how government can influence fiscal policy and monetary policy. You could increase the money supply or decrease the money supply. And this is different ways of doing it. Okay, so that is it for today. So again, make sure you guys are keeping up with lesson 4. You should have had 2 workbook pages. I posted the readings on Google Classroom, and then I had two Google Forms to go along with it. Then you had this, and then you have an ed puzzle. All right, stay good.